Hi everyone, hello from Singapore. Thank you for taking the time to join us for today's event on circular waste economy in Singapore and the Nordics, organized by SGInnovate and Nordic Innovation House. My name is Jody from SGInnovate, and for those of you who may be more new to us, we are a global investment company set up as a private entity and funded by the Singapore government with the mission to build deep tech innovations for Singapore, for the world. We do so by investing in and helping to build deep tech startups in the field of artificial intelligence, medtech, quantum tech, and increasingly, we're also starting to look into newer areas such as urban solutions and sustainability, advanced manufacturing, and agri-food. We also work closely with the entrepreneurial scientists and clinicians to help build their innovative research from lab to market, as well as develop deep tech talent and engage with a vibrant deep tech ecosystem. Part of our initiatives to strengthen the deep tech ecosystem and generate knowledge sharing are through community events such as the one we have today. Today's webinar will focus our discussion on the opportunities of the water and waste management space that are helping to contribute to our circular economy future, and we hope that you enjoy the session. Without further ado, I'd now like to pass the time to Sami, Community Director of Nordic Innovation House, to also share some opening remarks before our panel discussion. Sami, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Jody and SGInnovate, for having us with you today, and also very, very warm welcome on my behalf. A couple of words about Nordic Innovation House before I hand over to our exciting panelists. So Nordic Innovation House is essentially what we call as a community platform which supports and accelerates and help high quality Nordic tech startups and scale-ups and growth companies that are coming to Singapore, and of course, many of them are using Singapore as a springboard then for the broader Southeast Asia markets. We are supported by the Nordic Innovation, and I would say that we have a very unique collaboration between the Nordic countries. And in our Singapore team, we have Innovation Norway, Business Sweden, Embassy of Finland, Business Iceland, and Embassy of Denmark. We also have other offices globally, and our journey actually started from Silicon Valley, which was our first office, then followed by New York, then Singapore, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. So currently we have five locations globally to support Nordic companies. I would say that our daily work is quite industry agnostic, but then we have a very clear focus on certain verticals, such as med and health tech, smart cities, and then the circular economy. And then under these focus areas, we're running, for example, these virtual market entry programs, which is also one reason why we are here today. So last week was our first week of our water, waste, and food virtual market entry program. And 10 Nordic companies met almost 200 different stakeholders and decision makers and policy makers, investors, and potential business partners virtually here in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And if you want to find out more about these companies and their great solutions, you can check their profiles behind this link that I'm posting now on the chat. And if you want to connect with any of these companies, you can find their contact details from these profile cards, or then you can alternatively connect our team directly. But now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over the stage to Remy Cesaro, who will moderate the exciting panel. And thanks again for SGInnovate for having us here today. And Remy, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Sami. Thanks a lot, Jody, for organizing this event. Good evening, everyone. It is my great privilege to be the moderator for this panel discussion tonight. Before I introduce you the different panelists, I would like to bring everybody onto a journey on waste management and water management in Singapore. The goal of what I'm going to show you is only to frame the conversation and for you to have the basis about what we're talking about when we talk about waste and water management in Singapore. When we talk about waste management, there's usually three sectors we talked about: construction and demolition, domestic for residential, and non-domestic for commercial and industrial. In Singapore, construction and demolition is about 20% of the waste. Half will be commercial and industrial, and a quarter for domestic. And this is how waste flows in Singapore. Overall, the construction and demolition is about 100% recycled in Singapore. You have the non-domestic sector, which is about 63% recycling rate, and the domestic sector, which is 17% recycling rate in 2019. Whatever is not recycled will eventually go to a waste to incineration plant in Singapore. Ashes from the incinerator will eventually end up in Semakau landfill, where it will stay for the eternity. Overall, in Singapore, in 2019, the recycling rate was about 59%. And as you probably know, reaffirmed in its Green Plan 2030, Singapore intends to achieve a 70% overall recycling rate by 2030. In this conversation, we will not talk about construction demolition. We will exclusively focus on residential and non-residential waste. And as you will quickly find out, we will talk a lot about food waste. The second thing I want you to have an idea about is, where does the water come from in Singapore? The history of the supply of water in Singapore is actually very close to the story of Singapore itself. Firstly, we had the rainwater catchment. Then as Singapore grew, an agreement was made with Malaysia to import water from the Johor River. Afterward, as Singapore was continuing to grow, Singapore in the 90s developed technologies and then scaled up the technologies to recycle wastewater from the industry and household through the technology called and the facility called New Water. In addition, Singapore also built and is building desalination plant to ensure reliability of the water supply in Singapore. Now, how the waste, the food, and the water link to each other is what we're going to discuss with our grad panelists right now. So we have three panelists today: Dr. Adrian Yeo, Dr. Mo Sharafadman, and Christine Legge. Sorry for the pronunciation. Before we dive into the different questions, I would like to ask each panelist to introduce themselves for 1 or 2 minutes to present themselves to the audience. Adrian, would you like to start?
Sure, hi. Yeah, thanks, Remy. My name is Adrian. I work at Sembcorp Industries. For people who don't know Singapore well, Sembcorp Industries is a conglomerate that's listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange. We are 49% owned by Temasek, which is our sovereign wealth fund. Here I look after the innovation that we have in our water business. Our water business includes plants in China, the Middle East, Philippines, and Singapore. So my role is to look at the digitalization as well as the introduction of new technologies for deployment into our facilities.
Thank you, Adrian. Mo, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. And yeah, my pleasure to be here. So my name is Mo, CEO and founder of Hydrolyp. Hydrolyp is a Singapore-based tech startup that we are aiming to make a difference in water and wastewater treatment. Hydrolyp basically provides a chemical-free, cost-effective, and environmentally friendly solution for industrial wastewater by replacing chemicals with electricity. So yeah, we founded the company 4 years ago, a little bit over 4 years ago. And yeah, so that's what we are trying to do. So we are bringing innovation to the wastewater treatment.
Thanks a lot, Mo.
Yeah.
Christine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I come from Norsk Gjenvinning. We're a Norwegian waste management company, the leading and largest player in Norway, handling non-domestic waste. Our goal is to ensure that we can recycle and make new products and new raw material out of as much waste as possible that we receive from our customers. And our customer base can be any kind of organization or company within any kind of sector. So we handle more or less all waste types. Some of it we recycle ourselves, and others we cooperate in the value chain with actors all across the globe, searching for the best solutions there is. Our innovation department is focusing on finding and developing new recycling solutions for those waste fractions that currently are either sent to landfill or sent to incineration. And we're also looking into new ways of reusing material rather than recycling it. So it's quite a broad spectrum where all kinds of waste is in focus.
Yeah, and that will be extremely relevant for this conversation tonight. And to finish, myself, I am the founder and director of Zero Waste City. Zero Waste City is a company based in Singapore, and we provide waste management services and support for commercial and industrial facilities to reduce waste, save money, and eventually help companies to achieve zero waste goals. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and we will start to dive into the conversation for tonight. So as you have all read into the presentation of this presentation, we will talk about water, waste, food, and all related to the concept of circular economy for Singapore and the Nordics. The very first question will be addressed to Adrian. And as you all know, to build a circular economy, we need to integrate together infrastructures, policies, industries, and of course, people. To Adrian, will you be able to give us an overview for the case of Singapore about what are the major roadblocks towards having a fully integrated ecosystem to recover as much as resources as possible? You're on.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think in Singapore, there is a lot of ambition by the government to try to go as circular as possible. And I think that companies are being encouraged to do so. I think on that front, given the very large focus that all companies, all industries are with circularity, with net zero, I think that on the company front, on the commercial front, there is definitely going to be a lot of progress. I think that the roadblock or the difficulty will come more from the people front, the regular folks like me, like my parents, etc. Because when we talk about circularity, it does come with implication of perhaps higher costs, right? Where now the government is introducing or considering introducing a bill to say that when you take the extra plastic bag, they'll charge you an extra 20 cents or something. So to me, that is obviously a way to push people to remember to bring your own reusable bags. But on the people front, it's like, why do I have to pay more for something that used to be free? And this thing costs probably half a cent. Why are you charging me 20 cents for it? So there is a little bit of pushback and unhappiness that the government will have to overcome. I think it's also the general mindset of I would say Singaporeans, which is more that so if you go to the US or if you go to Europe, I think there is a general acceptance of secondhand buying old furniture. In Singapore we don't have that, so old furniture is all taken and rather recycled, but all thrown away and incinerated. So if you ask me what the biggest roadblock is, I would say that it would really be the attitudes of the people, which the government is looking to change. I think we'll get there, but it'll just take some time.
Thanks a lot, Adrian. I will actually have a follow-up question afterward on the business side after. But first, I would like to redirect these questions then to Christine, who has worked obviously in this field as well. And the Norwegian perspective will be actually quite interested to talk about, and especially in terms of consumer education and consumer engagement.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting to hear the perspective from Singapore, and I think it is definitely a different one from what we see in Scandinavia on sort of a high level. But I do think when it comes to sort of the infrastructure and the potential for really creating a true circular economy, I'm sure there must be a lot of similarities, to be quite honest. I mean, on the people side and sort of engagement, we see that people are very much sort of enlightened on the fact that we can recycle quite a few of the different waste types that you have in your household. So typically we have a lot of producer responsibility solutions, which means that, for instance, glass packaging for jam or wine bottles and plastic packages for food, and metal for also food. All these kinds of specific materials we have solutions for, and it's widely known how to sort of get rid of it. Where do we throw it and how do we throw it? So it's different collection systems in each city, but still you would know how to handle it wherever you live. And it is a lot of trust in it, but I do think the trust part is very important, because there has been quite a few sort of situations, or maybe not situations, but rather sort of discussions in recent years with how much is actually recycled. What is the true recycling rate of, for instance, the plastic packaging from a pack of ham? And previously it's been measured in how much has been sent to recycling, as opposed to how much is truly turned into something new, a new plastic product. And I think this is something that we're sort of struggling with more, with the fact that you don't necessarily know, and it's not that transparent, what the real sort of effect is. But I also think sort of on a more structural, in a more structural setting, there's a lot of very important sort of aspects that needs to be also addressed. And for one, it's the fact that you need to have the quality of the product being able to be actually used by the rest of the value chain. And that is one of the key points that we see, that if we're going to produce any kind of new recycling solution, it's very much dependent on building a robust value chain where you have all the actors present and all sort of actors wanting the same, so that you design a product so that it's actually possible for it to be recycled. And you also set up all the take-back systems, or the sort of the logistics behind it, so that you're able to get it back into the economy. And you also, of course, you need to have the infrastructure of the physical recycling plants and all the technology relevant there. And that also means that you need to have the volumes. So yeah, it's a broad picture, I would say, of what's the biggest challenges. But I think, of course, the people aspect and the engagement is a big part of it, of course.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christine. So you have talked actually quite about a lot of things around the consumer engagement and how to get people involved in terms of how to recycle right, particularly. We did mention a few solutions regarding to containers, and that's more an FYI for the audience. You have to know that in Norway and most of Scandinavian countries, if I'm not wrong, there are deposit return schemes which incentivize the return of goods to the shops. And FYI, again, Singapore intends to have such a scheme by 2023. So things are moving in that direction. But I'm actually quite interested to see that you are highlighting like challenges or lack of trust, maybe I should say, or concern at least, in the recycling of other products, which are not particularly true. And you pointed out that whenever we design products, we need to make sure that it is usable for the whole value chain. Now we'll go back to Adrian for a moment, and I'll probably get back to you, Christine, as well, and to drive the conversation a bit more into the business side. So Adrian, for a moment, you did mention that one of the major roadblocks you see in Singapore is a perception that circular economy is more costly. Will you be able to explain a bit more why it is so, and what could be ways to address this perspective or real concern?
Well, I think, the perception that it's more costly is simply because I think there are various parts to it. So for example, if we look at energy, for example, I think the circularity has come down to a point where perhaps using renewable energy might be cheaper than using gas or coal-fired power plants. But that again depends on where you are. So in Singapore, we don't get a lot of good sun. I don't think we can build very high windmills, and we don't have very good wind. So then the question is that is it really going to be cheaper, or will my energy bill start going up? There are also suggestions that we can sort of get a big piece of land, perhaps in Indonesia, and then pipe the energy back into Singapore. And if you look at it, is that going to be cheaper than having a gas-fired power plant? Again, do the economics really work? So that seems like, in a sense, might be a little bit more expensive. If you look at waste or the recycling part of it, our experience, because Sembcorp is also a waste collection company, we do have all these recycling bins. And the problem that we have when we do this recycling is that the bins aren't sorted. So in the end, you have to bring it to a central location where you physically sort it, right? Plastics go here, glass goes here, blah, blah, blah. And then you find that, is it really cheaper to recycle? So the answer is probably not going to be much cheaper to recycle. It's just something that we need to do because we do believe in protecting the environment. In the same way, when you look at the water, which is the other part of it, if you had water from a river, obviously that's going to be cheap. They're going to talk about cents per cubic meter. But if you want to have circularity, you want to take your wastewater and you want to recycle it, then the cost will be higher. So I think we are moving, I mean, probably 10 years ago, this conversation would be very different. There's just no way. We just can never afford to recycle water. We can never afford to have a lot of solar. But you can see all the costs coming down. And I think then that is sort of driving the net zero economy, where it does make economic sense to do this circularity. But we are kind of in the early processes of that, where the numbers, where I feel that the two lines are just beginning to intersect, and then there's a lot of education that we need to do to show people that it does make a bit more sense to talk about circularity and net zero.
Maybe I can, maybe Remy, I can add something to what Adrian was mentioning. Yes, so please. There's a exactly as Adrian was mentioning, there are two sides to it. One is are we moving towards the technology to be helping to make those decisions easier, like in terms of the cost, in terms of the basically changing that perceptions that, okay, you can do recycling. But there's one side is the technology, the another side is the consumer behavior, which consumer behavior, okay, a little bit of what Christian mentioned about it, but actually I wanted to talk a little bit bigger in terms of the picture. The way that we should look at the environment or even circular economy, I believe that is much bigger and deeper problem. So for example, what we have seen for the past couple of years, as long as we don't agree on that, for example, environmental matters, that climate change is one of the biggest, if it's not the biggest problem in the world, a lot of this conversation becomes, like it gets to the technical level, and as Adrian mentioned, it might happen, so you might end up saying that, oh, okay, so maybe sorting all this waste and all of this still is expensive. So it goes a little bit one step further, but it still doesn't get to the practical stage. So like any other decision that we make in the world, if we need to make sacrifices for getting basically to the goal point that we want. If the goal is protecting the environment, if protecting the climate, it's from the both governmental companies or even the consumer behavior of the people. We need to make some sacrifices to be able to do that. For example, this sacrifice, the technology level, it was not like drastically different, the Nordic countries compared to the rest of the world, but they made some sacrifices to get basically to be on the front line of the circular economy. I think this kind of mindset should be something that I mean, at some point, every single country needs to talk about. Yeah.
This is brilliant. Thanks a lot, Mo. So just to rephrase some of the things that we have said just now. So Adrian, you have highlighted the fact that the additional the cost associated to circular economy is obviously the cost of the effort to collect, segregate, and then recycle those materials, and therefore you cannot do it all for free. Mo, you are just highlighting the fact that sacrifice must be done at some point because some of these goals are for the greater good of the country and on a more bigger scale, the planet. And you also highlighted the fact that if sacrifices do need to be made, we need to make sure that we all speak the same language and we all agree on the same goals. And that's extremely relevant and important. And actually, I would like you, if you don't mind, if you can dive a bit more into this subject, and particularly if you can highlight examples where this kind of conversation is yet to happen in the water side or waste side?
Right. Okay, sure, absolutely. So definitely for the past couple of years, through my own experience through Hydrolyp, I've seen the changes in the consumer behavior. When I talk about consumer, not necessarily I'm talking about the end users or basically the people at home. I'm talking even sometimes about the companies that they were not making decisions based on the sustainability footprint that the companies is going to have, but slowly they're making more and more kind of such decisions. But one of the things, when, like, for example, we introduced our company as a wastewater treatment company, but wastewater and water, they are not separable. When at the bigger picture, we always talk about that, okay, if the climate change goes this way, we're going to have the shortage of the water supply to this basically category of the countries or to the developed countries because of the level of the water usage that they have. But actually, if we step back, we look at it, when we use water, so it means that we are generating almost the same amount of wastewater. And if we look at the wastewater differently, if you look at the wastewater from the circular economy or from the recycling standpoint, actually, it's possible to make a lot of changes. For example, just to give you some of the numbers, we probably every of the audience, we hear from the national TVs, from internet, from here and there that, hey, we need to conserve more water. We need to change the habits that we have in terms of what products that we're using. But actually, the one stat says that, okay, the biggest withdrawal of the water in the world is, on average, is agriculture. If you put agriculture for a moment aside, you just compare the industry to municipalities, meaning that what's the humans and the public is using and what's the industry is using. On average, globally, we are talking about 11% of the water is being used by the, let's say, the human for the personal consumptions, but nearly 20%, which is 90% of it, and 19% of it is used by the industry. So they are tapping from the same water, from the same resource. So if we help, like, for example, the mission that the Hydrolyp has or a lot of other companies that they have, if we help companies to recycle the water, so it means that 19%, it goes lower. Every single 1% that it goes lower, so it means that we are helping to have more resources of the water. And one of the interesting about it, the industrial usage is this is more concentrated over the developed countries, which makes sense because they are more developed and they have more industries, and that means that they are using more of the water. So actually, this actually is helping that equation a bit. So we don't need to go around to the let's say South African countries or let's say the small cities in Middle East or China to solve that problem. If we can solve, like, for example, Singapore, right? Singapore has an industry, even though it's small. If we can help to recycle that level of the water, so it means that we are using less from the resources. That example goes to every single country, from Europe to China to Asia and United States. So yeah.
No, excellent. Excellent. So just for me to rephrase again a few more things you have said here. So you highlighted the fact that, yes, we have limited supply of water, and therefore allocation of water is important. And as you pointed out, if each industry or each sector were able to recycle their own water in their own right, they will increase the availability of water for other activities, and therefore better themselves and better the community as a whole.
That's right. That's right. So one thing just to add on, so just, okay, talk about the good stuff as well. For the past couple of years, I've seen even the smaller companies, okay, such a bigger ones, such as Sembcorp, definitely they have their own initiatives, or they have that recycling, the goal for it. But even I've seen it at the smaller companies, like, for example, the waste collection companies that they collect, let's say, the oily type of the water. So these companies traditionally, they've been just collecting, they make mostly a business out of it, not just the way that they look at how I can recycle the water, but recently they make the decisions that, hey, can I basically improve my productivity, improve my factory by recycling that water? Or let's say if it's a construction company, can I get or acquire a new technology that it helps me in sustainability footprint, or in terms of the whatever, like the lower manpower I can use. Like if this is not just one factors, when you talk about sustainability, we are talking about a very, very general subject that you can talk about manpower, you can talk about the quality of, as Christian mentioned, quality of the product that you use, as Adrian mentioned, like how we separate these things. It's just a very, very big subject. If we can contribute to each of this, that would be already a progress.
Yes, as any small action is good, and if it can be done locally, then you act globally. Yes, excellent. Just for a moment, before we dive into another part of the conversation, which is about food waste, which I would like to address, I'd like to step back for a moment, back to the question of consumers and waste management. There have been a few questions that just came up from the audience that are very interested to know more about what can be done to create more people engagement and also to bring more trust in the way that we manage resources. This question will be first probably for Christine. If you can share in terms of how government and organization in Nordic countries have acted to bring the people more involved, and also if you see a way for digital technologies to facilitate and further improve the build of trust and engagement from the consumer side.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of factors that are involved here to sort of build the trust. I don't think there's one action to sort of solve that challenge. But it's been, I think now for 30 years approximately, sort of a take-back scheme for a lot of different materials or waste materials in the Nordics. And if I should speak for Norway, which is most sort of close to home, I would say that it's a lot of information that you can receive it in the mail. At some points, you actually also get visitors from your local waste management, sort of the domestic waste management company, that also knock on doors and speak with you and tell you how to sort and why you should sort. And there's also information through commercials where it's sort of highlighted what kind of waste fractions you need to sort and how and where. So there's quite a few sort of channels for communications that they use, and I think also because it's sort of now such an sort of integrated system, it's something that you, to a certain degree, take for granted that works, but at the same time, you also see that in some sort of forums, you will have these questions coming up, and there's been a lot of newspaper sort of debates on what really happens and what is sort of the true effect. And I think this is actually happening because there is a larger focus on the environmental side of how we're consuming, and also a larger focus on sustainability coming from, for instance, the EU with new policies that are sort of hitting each European country. But it also sort of trickles down from the national level and onto sort of the individual personal sort of engagement level. So this sort of all brings together a little universe on how this is functioning, and also setting the spotlight on those materials where it's potentially not working as well as it should be. So, and that's probably mostly connected to where we export the waste, where it's handled in other countries. So, for instance, plastics is often sent to Germany because they have a massive sorting facility there, and then sort of ensure that this kind of plastic is taken to this facility and this kind of plastic is taken to a different facility. So, for instance, for glass, it's handled locally in Norway, and that means that you sort of have a more transparent system. So it's I'm not sure if it sort of gives you the whole solution, but I think the fact that it's in focus and that it's debated in several different sort of channels, both on TV and newspapers and on political level means that it's at least in on the agenda, I would say. But I think also it's just sort of to finish off, it's a big focus here in Norway often that that you start the sorting of the waste already at the source. So we call it source sorting, if you sort of directly translate it. And that means that you can sort of jump that action that Adrian talked about, the fact that you get everything in together and then you need to source it at a recycling plant, which is more challenging. So you also maintain the quality at a higher level by doing that. And that also is how the non-domestic waste is handled. And we also have a lot of incentives there, which means that businesses are actually a lot better than households when it comes to sort of the, as it was for Singapore as well, with how much is recycled, but also how much is sorted.
Excellent. So basically, multiplication of communication channels, public debates, open communication on this one is definitely the key tool that you have seen works. Maybe this, and I will then ask the question to Mo and Adrian. Do you think that the public is interested enough in these subjects? And do you think there's enough public information available for consumers to be fully aware of how resources are managed?
Yeah, then I guess I'll go first. I would say yes. I think recently it's very clear that in Singapore there is a big push for sustainability, circular economy. I mean, my daughter, who is 6 or 7, comes back from school and tells me that, oh, today she learned about circularity and we need to recycle to save the earth and things like that. So I never had that when I went to school. So I think it's a process, right? And I think I would say that probably in Norway, where you already have sorting at source and all that, you guys are probably further ahead in this process than where Singapore is. But I do believe that since you've already charted the way, then it should be.
Adrian, you're on mute.
Oh, so sorry. I was talking to myself. Haha. So, so what I was saying is that there is a process to this, and you know, I was my kids who are 7 and 10. They do come back from school and tell me that they are learning about circularity and about the need to recycle and save the environment. When I went to school, I never had that particular courses. So I think in Singapore, we are moving towards that. We are moving towards training the next generation to be a bit more aware of what they're doing and how it affects the environment. I believe that a country like Norway, where you do sorting at source, they're probably a bit ahead than what we are, where we are still pushing towards that. I believe we already have taxes on plastic bags and all that, and we are beginning to do that. So I'm sure we'll get there, but it'll just take some time. We are moving towards the right direction, I feel.
Thanks a lot, Adrian. Mo, would you like to
add
something?
Yeah, well, no, just not much to say, but I totally agree with Adrian that the direction of Singapore is totally correct. We are stepping towards it. Like even like Adrian mentioned about his daughter, but even one of my wife's students recently sent a picture to show it to me because the kid knew that I'm in the sustainability and environment, and he wanted to show that what a big bag of the correction tape that he has collected, and he want to pass it to the recycle centers. That's just like, it reminds me of the same as Adrian, that we didn't have much of such an attitude or such a teaching or learning back then, but now it's more emphasizes even in the school, even in a family level, which is required because the consumer behavior, as we started the conversation, it doesn't change overnight. It's something that it changes over the decades. I remember PUB about the new water. New water is literally as a municipal wastewater is getting treated and get to your tap water. I remember a number of years ago that some of the pioneers, they were talking about it. They're saying that back then, when we introduced it, even before we introduced it and putting it in tap water, people, they were calling it toilet water, and they were basically against it. And then we had record of thousands of the interviews and the PR to just tell people that, hey, that this is not harmful, this is something good for you, good for the country. And then now, if you talk to every single Singaporean, they take it as a pride that, hey, we do have a new water. We are basically on the edge of the technology for water recycling. That just shows that it takes time.
Thanks a lot, Mo. And that's great what you are saying, because they bring us smoothly to the last segment of our conversation, which is the integration of wastewater, water, and food. So as you all know, Singapore intends to increase its capacity to produce local food in Singapore, further reduce the amount of food waste going to incineration, and of course, increase the recycling of wastewater. So, well, maybe I will start with Mo, actually. So PUB is currently building large infrastructures to facilitate and maximize the recycling of wastewater. Sorry, there's a bit of thunder on my side. Where do you see some gaps or opportunities, actually, for foreign technologies and local companies to further contribute to the recycling of wastewater in order to extract particularly organic matter for food production?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I would say it's a puzzle that it has a few of the moving, basically it has a few moving parts. One of it is as a recipient, basically as a recipient part of that technology, like first of all, PUB and the government needed to take these steps that they are setting up this PUB trust nexus, or even you can see it from the number of the grants that they are putting in a junction between the companies and basically technology wants to develop something. That's the first part, but that's not all of it. The second part is we need to train the industries. We need to help that, like the same as I think this what I mentioned it earlier, but the same as we are trying to improve that consumer behavior of the people, we need to change the consumer behavior of the company CEOs, the way that the industry or whoever is taking the biggest water or the biggest, basically that whatever, it's not just necessarily water, even that's food or that part of it. They need to be on board to try the new technologies, to try to see that how they can move towards this the goal that PUB and the government has it. So yeah, that's the second part. And the third part, I would say the technology gap. Yes, it's true that in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of technology companies that are trying to take the technology to the next level. But the way that I look at the world is that why not we provide a better environment for, let's say, the Southeast Asian countries or Singapore companies to work much closer with the technology companies of, let's say, Nordic countries that they have done this one before, or they are at least a few steps ahead of us. So if it's done basically in these 3 steps, and it's not just limited to the introduction level, and it's basically we are able to take action upon them, yes, we will be able to, with that bigger picture plan that the Singapore government has, we definitely can move towards it. But yeah, it's all the parties, all 3 parties needs to take necessary steps towards it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Mo. Yeah, these 3 steps are actually very relevant, and that's typically when we talk about connecting the infrastructure with the people and the technologies. Yeah. Related then to Christine, because Mo, you were mentioning the Nordic countries. So in Singapore right now, they are going to enforce soon the mandatory food waste segregation from large food waste generators in order to, of course, consolidate the amount of food waste for recycling. Will you be able to share a bit more in terms of what technologies are currently used in Nordic countries and could potentially be applied to Singapore?
Absolutely. When it comes to food waste, it's sort of I would say a history of how this has been handled, and that sort of lays the premises for what's the structure in Norway today. But just to take sort of one step back, I think Norway, quite similar to Singapore, has quite a few actors handling non-domestic waste. But then we have a myriad of actors handling domestic waste. So we're 5 million inhabitants, and we have, I think it is approximately 80 companies handling the waste coming from domestic households, and they are handling it within a geographical area. So I think for Norway and for Singapore, this will be very different because you're quite a densely populated area, whereas we're quite widespread. And I think that also sort of factors into this. But so to go back to your question, historically, it's been a lot of sort of home composting and also larger composting areas, where the aim, of course, is to sort of take advantage of all the valuable assets that are within food waste, and this means that you can of course take this and you can make a fertilizer out of it and bring it back to the production of new food farming and food production and agriculture. And then we also see that biogas has been growing quite a lot in recent years, and this has often been set up by these domestic companies in areas closely related to where there is typically agricultural activity. And the challenge here has been that you have all of these, as I said, 80 companies spread out, and they do often cooperate, but at the same time, they're set up and they're never sort of filled. Their capacity is never filled. So some of them are very much challenged by the fact that they don't have enough volumes in. So this is a big sort of, I would say, challenge related to how to handle waste in a very sort of diversified and widespread country. But it seems like biogas has sort of come to stay, and will, even though it's a bit of a challenge with the volume so far, it still is sort of the best alternative, because it means that we can both make use of the gas, and very often this gas is then used in local public transport buses, for instance. So it sort of goes back to society, and the fertilizer is often used then, of course, in agricultural farming. And we also have some areas where they've set up this biogas production, and they build their own these glass buildings where you typically create, for instance, tomatoes or other kinds of food. So I would say that this is probably the method that is coming to stay, and then we will see if it's going to be more sort of scaled down solutions that will take over in the more less densely populated areas where you don't have the sort of the need for the high volume, because we do see that there's a lot of actors and startups that are now creating module-based biogas solutions compared to these large-scale industrial settings. So I would say that this is probably so far the best use of both getting the energy, but also the minerals and vitamins and what have you in food waste.
Thanks a lot, Christine. Yes, so technologies are available. Biogas is one of them that can recover both energy and organic matter for food production. It is 4:52. I would like to be able to dive into some of the questions, but maybe before, Adrian, in case of, would you like to add something in terms of the role of SEMcorp as a waste collector for the collection of food waste for the food production? Or if you want, we can dive straight into the question from the audience.
I think that we don't collect food waste in general. We are a general waste collector, so I can't really answer to that. So perhaps we just go into the questions.
Sure, no worries. All right, so we had a few questions which cover actually quite a wide range of topic. The very first one is related to end market for recycled product. The particular example which is given here is around plastic waste and the fact that in some countries, recycled PET, for instance, is not accepted as a material for the manufacturing of plastic bottles and so on. And typically the question being asked is, in such a circumstance, what are the kind of recycled waste and end markets in Singapore that needs support and how can this be done? So probably Adrian would be the best person to talk, I guess, on this topic. One reality is the fact that you have a few recyclers in Singapore, plastic recyclers in Singapore, but they usually work with high quality and clean plastic waste streams, which typically come from the industrial sector. As far as I know, and maybe Adrian, you can confirm, most of plastic waste from the domestic sector will be recycled overseas where they have more suitable facilities. And as a matter of fact, NEA is currently considering the idea of building in Singapore a plastic recycling plant. So we have the question of technologies and companies willing to recycle product, and then we have the question of companies willing to use recycled materials. So Adrian, would you like to try to answer this question?
A lot for me. I think you're exactly right. So I think you have to understand what kind of industries that exist in Singapore. They all tend to be high value added industries. So if you're making plastic bags or something like that, it's unlikely you're going to have a giant facility doing that here in Singapore, simply because our costs are high. And we don't have a lot of space, we don't to build large factories and things like that. So we go for high value added things. And in general, things that use, I would say that those low value or plastics that we recycle a lot of times and the chains are not as strong or as the quality is not as good. We don't really have facilities that can use it here. And I think that's the main reason why it's all exported. So I think it's an economic problem at what kind of value-added products can I make with recycled plastics. I'm not an expert in plastics myself, but I would think that there aren't really that many, and hence there won't be a demand for it here. So it's an economics problem, I would think.
Yes, there's indeed an economic problem, and also, as mentioned, is also quite deep problem. Christine, maybe would you like to add something on this one?
I think for every kind of waste stream, you have sort of the same challenge, because you need to ensure that there is a market downstream for whatever you're collecting. So this is why, as sort of mentioned previously, we see the very large need for working within the value chain from sort of the start, and also very often starting with the end customer, in this case, the customer who will actually use a recycled product. But I think when it comes to specific materials where you potentially see a big challenge, i.e. for PET, it also helps when you have a lot of focus within the regulation. So just to sort of take one example, one of the very successful schemes that we have in Norway is a take-back solution for plastic bottles and cans with Coke, for instance. And you will just bring this back to the shop, and you will get 20 US cents for each bottle that you return. And this means that they get such a big stream of the exact same kind of plastic and exact same kind of material, that it's easier for them to sort of discuss with the end user again what they need and how they can set up a structure, which means that it's clean enough or heated enough, or you name it, whatever their need is. So sort of the volumes is often an important part for actually getting into these conversations in the beginning. But when you also have policies that say that the producers of, for instance, PET bottles need to use or have a certain percentage of recycled material in them, that also, of course, opens a lot of doors. So I think for us in Europe, the European Green Deal is a very, very important sort of milestone, and really sort of accelerating the speed of which that we're working at to really make a circular economy true. So it's often, I think it's a big combination, as I said, of policies and volumes, to be quite honest, and quality.
Thanks to us, Christine. So yes, the importance of regulation to drive the industry in a specific direction and achieve the goal of circularity. All right, so I will just take the time for one last question. Most of the questions in the Q&A have actually already been answered for a part of them, but I will just ask this last question to Mo, because I actually quite like this question. The question is from Orion, and it says, "Hi, and thank you for this webinar. My question is how to motivate our city to be involved in a circular economy approach. What is your experience?" So we obviously talked about it before, about technology, infrastructures, people, countries. Now, more in your personal experience, and maybe someone would like to join after, do you think that Singapore is in the right track to achieve this goal of circular economy, and what else could be done?
Sure. So as I said earlier, so yes, Singapore is on the right track, but the question is that with the current pace, are we getting the result as what we want, let's say, in the next couple of years? So for that, I would say the answer is a little bit more complex, because as I said, there's a bit of the moving parts, but that's proven in other parts of the world as well, not just for the circular economy, but for any type of legislations. If you want the society to get to do something in a much shorter time, like legislation and the laws needs to come in. So it means that if it can be done by both ways. It can be done by bringing incentives, or it can be done by having some sort of punishment for it. What I mean by punishment is if you change the regulation in terms of how much waste you are disposing, or how you are handling that, or nowadays it's a little bit more complicated. What's your carbon footprint? If we put a little bit more legislation around this, definitely you will get the results faster. And again, like, we need to work hand to hand with industry. It's not just about the punishment strategy, it can be in terms of the incentives as well. Through my own experience, so as we are providing, let's say, solution for this chemical-free solution for the construction sector, BCA, which is the construction sector of Singapore, nearly around 10, 12 years ago, they did pretty well in this sector. So by bringing incentives for the companies to do water treatment on the site. So it was the regulations, but they encouraged the companies by bringing more incentives. And then in a matter of literally 3 years, you could see that majority of the companies, they're already using that. So yeah, if we combine these two, definitely we get a faster result. But as a bigger picture, again, I said, everyone needs to be on the same page. Is it climate change is a big problem in the world? If someone thinks that it's not the top 3 problem in the world, then if that person is making decision at any level, then the climate change, circular economy, environmental protection won't be of the top priority as well. So if you are getting on the same page and with a bit of the help of the law, then yeah, we can get this thing going faster.
Thanks a lot, Mo. And that's beautiful to close this discussion. Well, I am very sorry for the audience that we cannot answer specifically every question, but at least I do hope that you will get some insight for each of them. I will hand over the microphone back to Jody for the closing remark.
So thank you so much, Remy, for the great introduction of our topic, as well as the fantastic moderation of our discussion today. On behalf of SGInnovate, I would also like to give special mention to all of our panelists, to Adrian, to Christine, and to Mo for joining us for the discussion today. We would also like to extend our gratitude again to our close friends and event partner, the Nordic Innovation House, for also making the event today possible. For our attendees, thank you for tuning in and staying till the end of the session. And while we may not be able to answer all of the questions due to time constraints, I hope that we've managed to have a well-rounded discussion on the effective solutions across water and waste management in Singapore and in the Nordics. And we hope that we're able to transition quicker from a linear to a circular waste management philosophy. Please also keep a lookout for our post-event EDM, which will include a recording of the session. And we hope that you can also continue to show us support at SGInnovate on our online events. We do hope to see you at our future events, and please have a great evening or morning from wherever you're tuning from. Thank you and goodbye.